Have you ever noticed that the people who seem the most emotionally distant still manage to end up in long-term relationships? It's not a coincidence. Avoidants don't just settle down with anyone, they're drawn to a very particular type of partner, and once you understand why, you'll see relationships in a completely new way. We all know someone who avoids closeness, who seems to pull away the moment things get serious, and yet many of these people still choose someone to build a life with. Why? Because avoidants are subconsciously searching for balance. They're not looking for the loudest spark, the most dramatic love, or the endless chase. They're looking for someone who gives them safety without pressure, connection without chaos, and love without constant demand. The truth is, avoidants don't run from love, they run from fear. Fear of being consumed, of losing themselves, of getting trapped in something they can't control. But when they meet someone who understands the rhythm of giving space while still showing consistency, that fear melts away. And this is the kind of partner they stay with, not the one who chases harder, but the one who shows up steadily, the one who says, I see you, I value you, and I don't need to suffocate you to prove it. That's why avoidants in the long run choose partners who embody calm strength, emotional steadiness, and self-sufficiency, because with them, intimacy feels safe instead of scary. When we think about avoidance, the first assumption many people make is that they don't want love at all. They're often painted as cold, detached, or incapable of real intimacy, but that's not the truth. Avoidants absolutely crave connection, just like anyone else. What they fear isn't love itself, it's what they believe love might cost them. The real fear lies in losing independence, losing control of their own life, and losing the ability to be themselves without being consumed by another person's needs. That fear is powerful, and it drives much of their behavior in relationship. Imagine someone who's built their identity around being self-reliant. They've learned from past experiences, or even from childhood, that closeness often comes with expectations, demands, or even suffocation. Maybe they grew up with parents who needed them to be the caretaker, or perhaps they had a partner in the past who was overly dependent on them for happiness. To them, closeness became associated with pressure. So now, as adults, when someone gets too close too fast, it feels less like love and more like losing air. That's why they pull away, not because they don't care, but because they're afraid of being trapped in a situation where they can't breathe. This fear can be misunderstood by their partner. If you're dating someone avoidant, you might notice they're warm and affectionate one day, then suddenly distant the next. It's confusing. You might think you did something wrong or that they've lost interest, but often what's happening is an internal battle. They want the connection, they're drawn to the intimacy, but at the same time, they're on high alert for any sign that they might be losing their autonomy. It's not rejection, it's self-preservation. It's also why avoidants are so careful about who they choose in the long run. They're not looking for a partner who overwhelms them with neediness or constant demands for reassurance. That kind of dynamic feels threatening. What they are drawn to is someone who offers love without taking away freedom. Someone who says, I care deeply about you, but I don't need you to complete me. I choose you not because I have to, but because I want to. That subtle distinction makes all the difference for them. This explains why so many avoidants end up in relationships with people who have a quiet strength about them. They value partners who are secure in themselves, who can handle space without panicking, and who don't see distance as abandonment. When they find someone like that, their fear softens. They don't feel like love is going to rob them of their independence. Instead, love becomes something that adds to their life rather than taking from it. The irony is that the very thing people criticize avoidants for, keeping their independence at all costs, is also what makes their love, when they finally commit, incredibly meaningful. They're not with someone because they need them to survive. They're with them because they've faced that fear of losing independence and decided this person is worth the risk. That choice isn't made lightly, and it's why when avoidants do settle down, they often stay for the long run. Avoidants are often misunderstood because of the way they respond to intimacy. Many people assume they are drawn to partners who mirror their distance, people who are just as unavailable as they are, but that's rarely the case. In fact, Avoidants are deeply attracted to partners who embody calm and emotional security. These are the people who don't panic when space is created in the relationship, who don't see a temporary withdrawal as abandonment, and who can remain steady in the face of uncertainty. For an avoidant, that steadiness feels like oxygen. It allows them to relax into the relationship instead of feeling constantly pressured to perform or reassure. Think about what happens when someone gets close to an avoidant and begins to demand constant reassurance. The avoidant feels their walls rising. They interpret this urgency as a threat, a sign that their independence might be under siege. Even if they genuinely like the person, that pressure activates their fear system and they instinctively pull away. Now imagine the opposite. Instead of pressure, the avoidant encounters a partner who is calm, who doesn't need to question every silence, and who doesn't read every pause as a rejection. That partner communicates without even needing to say it. I trust that you're here, even when you need a little space. This kind of emotional security creates the exact environment where the avoidant feels safe enough to come closer on their own terms. It's important to understand that avoidants aren't looking for someone who never expresses needs. They're not attracted to coldness or indifference. What they want is someone whose emotional world doesn't feel like quicksand. They don't want to be swallowed up by someone else's insecurity. When a partner is secure within themselves, when they can express needs without desperation or panic, it sends a powerful message. I want connection, but I don't need to lose myself to have it. That balance is irresistible to someone who fears being consumed. This is why avoidants often find themselves drawn to partners who radiate a quiet confidence. These are people who can hold their own in life, who have friends, passions, and goals outside of the relationship. They're not sitting by the phone waiting for a text or spiraling when a response takes a little longer than expected. Instead, they approach the relationship with a kind of emotional maturity that allows both partners to breathe. That maturity reassures the avoidant that intimacy won't become a prison, that love won't mean constant firefighting of insecurities or endless explanations for why they need personal space. Ironically, the more secure and calm the partner is, the more avoidants open up. It's like the nervous system of the avoidant finally relaxes. They no longer feel like they have to guard their independence so fiercely. They start to lean in, to share more of themselves, to take the risk of vulnerability. And this is the paradox. The less a partner chases, the closer the avoidant becomes. It's not gamesmanship. It's the natural response of someone who has finally found a relationship that feels safe rather than threatening. For someone with avoidant tendencies, consistency is everything. They are constantly scanning their relationships for signs that intimacy will turn into pressure, that love will become obligation, or that closeness will demand more than they can give. This scanning process often leaves them wary and slow to trust. That's why consistency is such a powerful antidote. When a partner shows up reliably, in words and in actions, the avoidant begins to lower their guard. Consistency communicates something avoidants rarely believe at first, that love doesn't have to be unpredictable, manipulative, or suffocating. It can be steady, dependable, and safe. Think about how avoidants often experience relationships early on. They may have grown up in environments where love came with strings attached, or where affection was inconsistent, sometimes overflowing, other times with. That kind of instability wires them to assume that closeness is temporary or conditional. So when they meet someone whose actions match their words, who doesn't swing from hot to cold depending on mood or circumstance, it challenges their expectation. It feels unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable, but slowly they begin to trust. Consistency doesn't mean perfection or never having conflict. It means showing up in a way that feels dependable over time. If an avoidant partner pulls back, the consistent person doesn't explode, chase, or collapse into panic. They remain steady. They don't overreact or punish the avoidant for needing space. Instead, they demonstrate through calm behavior that the relationship is still secure. This predictability is what slowly disarms the avoidant. Instead of feeling like they're trapped in a roller coaster, they start to experience a sense of balance. It's also important to see that consistency builds trust, not only in the avoidant's mind, but in their body. Many avoidants have a nervous system that reacts quickly to perceived threats of engulfment. They might feel tense when someone texts them constantly or panicked when asked to share feelings too soon. But when a partner shows consistency, checking in with warmth without smothering, responding reliably without demanding constant reassurance, it helps regulate that nervous system. Over time, the avoidant starts to associate intimacy not with chaos, but with calm. What often trips people up is the temptation to prove their worth through intensity instead of consistency. They think if they can just love harder, pursue stronger, or demand closeness more frequently, the avoidant will finally feel safe enough to commit. But intensity tends to backfire. It sends the avoidant running for the exits because it validates their fear of losing independence. Consistency, on the other hand, allows them to come closer voluntarily. It creates an environment where the avoidant isn't cornered into intimacy but invited into it. This is why avoidants so often stay with partners who provide that steady presence. The avoidant realizes, often subconsciously, that with this person, they don't have to constantly fight to protect their freedom. They're not being pulled into chaos or pressured into emotional labor they can't sustain. Instead, they see someone who is there when needed, who doesn't punish or panic, and who makes love feel like a stable foundation rather than a volatile storm. That sense of consistency is what transforms their guardedness into trust and their fear into commitment. One of the biggest mistakes people make when dating an avoidant is believing that the solution lies in trying hard. When they sense the avoidant pulling away, they increase the pursuit, sending more messages, asking more questions, making more demands for closeness. On the surface, it seems logical. If someone is slipping, the instinct is to hold on tighter. But for an avoidant, this has the opposite effect. The harder someone chases, the more the avoidant feels their independence is under threat, and the faster they retreat. It's not a matter of them being cruel or disinterested. It's a survival instinct rooted in their fear of being consumed. This is why over-pursuing backfires. An avoidant's nervous system interprets intense pursuit as pressure, and pressure equals danger. Even if they care about the person chasing them, the sensation of being hunted creates panic. They may shut down emotionally, withdraw communication, or create distance in subtle ways to regain a sense of control. To them, closeness under those conditions doesn't feel like love, it feels like being trapped. And nothing triggers an avoidant's defenses more than the possibility of losing autonomy. Instead of chasing harder, the most effective approach is steady presence. This doesn't mean withdrawing completely or playing cold games of indifference. It means remaining available, warm, and consistent, but not collapsing your entire identity into the pursuit of the avoidant. When they step back, you don't rush forward to fill the gap. You allow space while holding your own ground. This signals to the avoidant that they're not being suffocated, and paradoxically, it makes them more likely to move back toward you on their own terms. It's helpful to imagine the dynamic as a dance. When one person steps back, the instinct of the pursuer is to close the gap immediately. But in this dance, the best move is to hold your rhythm. By staying steady, you create balance. You demonstrate trust that the avoidant can and will return when they're ready. That trust is magnetic because it alleviates the fear of engulfment. Instead of feeling forced into closeness, the avoidant feels free to choose it. Over-pursuing also erodes attraction over time. When one person chases relentlessly, it creates an imbalance where the avoidant becomes the gatekeeper of intimacy and the pursuer becomes the beggar. That imbalance kills respect and makes genuine connection nearly impossible. On the other hand, when the pursuer maintains dignity, patience, and emotional steadiness, the relationship dynamic remains. The avoidant doesn't feel like they're holding all the power, and the pursuer isn't draining themselves trying to prove their worth. What surprises many people is that avoidants don't actually want distance forever. They want closeness too, but only when it feels safe. Chasing harder tells them it isn't safe, that their freedom will vanish the moment they step closer. Steady presence tells them the opposite. It reassures them that love can exist without pressure, that they can be with someone without being consumed. And when they finally feel that, the very walls they once built so high begin to come down, not because they were forced to, but because they finally want to. For avoidance, one of the most attractive qualities in a long-term partner is self-sufficiency. This doesn't mean coldness or detachment, but rather a sense that the partner has a life, an identity, and a sense of purpose outside of the relationship. When someone radiates this kind of independence, it reassures the avoidant that love will not become a cage. It tells them that the relationship is a choice, not a dependency, and that they are valued for who they are rather than for how well they can fill another person's emptiness. Avoidants are hypersensitive to the feeling of being needed in a way that feels overwhelming. If they sense that their partner's happiness depends entirely on them, their defenses shoot up. To them, it feels like being asked to carry the weight of someone else's life, and that pressure quickly becomes suffocating. But when they encounter someone who is already fulfilled on their own, someone who enjoys their friendships, their passions, and their goals, the dynamic shifts completely. Instead of feeling burdened, the avoidant feels invited into a life that is already rich and whole. That invitation feels safe because it doesn't come with the threat of being consumed. This is why self-sufficiency is magnetic. It communicates emotional security without words. An avoidant doesn't have to worry that every text they miss will lead to panic or that every moment of space will cause a spiral of insecurity. They know their partner can hold their own. That knowledge gives the avoidant room to breathe, and ironically, it makes them more willing to invest emotionally. When they don't feel like they're the only pillar holding the relationship up, they start to show up more fully. It's important to note that self-sufficiency isn't about playing distant or pretending not to care. It's not about withholding affection or acting like the relationship doesn't matter. True self-sufficiency is rooted in confidence and balance. It's the ability to love deeply while also knowing that your identity is not defined solely by the relationship. This kind of energy is deeply grounding for an avoidant because it proves that intimacy can coexist with independence. When avoidants choose a long-term partner, they often gravitate towards someone who demonstrates this balance naturally. They see the steadiness in how their partner handles challenges, the way they don't collapse under stress, and the way they can express needs without making them demand. That kind of quiet strength is profoundly appealing. It allows the avoidant to let down their guard and trust that the relationship won't devolve into constant drama or endless reassurance seeking. Over time, the self-sufficiency of the partner creates a foundation where the avoidant feels both free and connected. They realize that they're not responsible for their partner's entire emotional world, and that realization makes it easier for them to share their own inner life. The irony is that the more independent the partner is, the more dependent the avoidant becomes on the relationship in the healthiest sense, because they finally feel like they've found someone who won't take away their freedom, but will stand beside them in strength. When you really look at it, avoidants aren't the mysterious, unfeeling people they're often made out to be. They want love just like anyone else. The difference is that their path to lasting connection is shaped by a deep need to feel safe, respected, and free. They don't stay with the partner who chases hardest or demands the most. They stay with the one who brings calm instead of chaos, who shows consistency instead of confusion, and who holds their own life with strength and independence. What this teaches us is something far bigger than just how to love an avoidant. It shows us that healthy relationships aren't about pressure or fear. They're about choice, balance, and respect. They're about creating a space where both people can be fully themselves while building something together. When that kind of environment exists, even the most guarded hearts begin to open. So whether you identify as avoidant or you've loved someone who is, remember this: intimacy doesn't have to cost freedom, and love doesn't have to mean losing yourself. The right connection allows both people to breathe, and when that happens, it lasts. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I appreciate your attention, your openness, and your willingness to look deeper into what truly makes relationships work. I hope this gave you insight you can carry into your own life and your own love story. Take care, and until next time, thank you.